walking out to the landing pad that is surrounded by dense jungle, which is called the Khas Wilds, here by the citizens of the Empire. An untamed and largely unexplored part of the planet, it is primarily inhabited by the ferocious beasts that dwell within. A perfect location to isolate the Sith acolytes here at the Academy and to provide deadly trials by either stumbling into the ruins of their ancestors or having an encounter with malicious creatures that silently await their next meal. Usually any part of the jungle here on the planet is teeming with life. The chirping of Carder hawklings in their nests, the croaks of bulbo frogs calling for a mate, and on occasion, the thrashing echoes of death from one of the creatures in the jungle as a vine cat, 3 times the size of a man, secures its next victim within, its rows of protruding large teeth. Around the Sith Academy, however, it is dead silent. Not even the insects who would provide some level of ambient noise didn't make a single sound. Dremog never really understood why that was, and never bothered to ask, but now that he was leaving, he was wondering if the dark side power that exuded from these grounds was so much of a threat that even the infamous muscular bipedal monstrosity that is the Dremog Kro Gundark is apprehensive to even get within half a mile of its perimeter, which is manned by combat droids and a few Sith honor guard. Not as a means of protection for the acolytes, but to make sure there are no outside intrusions from the families of the students that have submitted themselves to darkness, which has happened on occasion. That even despite the honor and privilege to have your own offspring possibly join the ranks of the illustrious and powerful Sith Lords, forever bringing glory, riches, and unimaginable power to the house. Some of these parents would still foolishly chase after the admitted acolyte and would risk everything just to even see their child again, fearing the worst could happen to their offspring, as most of those who train in the ancient ways of the Sith rarely make it out the other side. Whereas the Jedi would have an inclusion mindset that the weak would be put to work on some remote agricultural world like Dantooine, the Sith would abolish any empathetic views to make sure only the strongest emerge from the depths of an uncertain demise. For if there was any leniency in this practice, it would only encourage a lack of commitment and playfulness, stifling any raw potential a student could have in such a complacent and peaceful environment. Halfway through the gangway, followed closely behind by the Imperial Army officer, 4 army soldiers, and a mysterious-looking man who appeared seemingly out of nowhere in Dremog's peripheral vision as they left the Academy's front entrance. The mysterious man, who only looks a few years older than him, clad in a gray and black uniform with a hood obstructing most of his face, picks up his pace to be only 2 feet behind him. Turning his head to the side whilst walking towards the end of the gangway, the young acolyte begins a quick re-examination of this individual who is keeping a very close eye on him. Dangling on the man's utility belt could be seen a strange-looking blaster pistol with a wide blade attached at the end of the muzzle, no doubt an effective weapon for close-quarters combat. On the other side of his waist looks to be some sort of handle for a weapon, possibly a blade. Only the hilt could be seen, but the young pureblood knew this wasn't a lightsaber. It was too thin, and to boot, he couldn't necessarily sense any real power coming from this man. So he paid it no further thought. With no other particular change in movements, mannerisms, or demeanor from the mysterious man, at least none that he could see, the young acolyte presses forward, turning his head to look ahead where there is a relatively large speeder at the end of the gangway. The top of the vehicle is enclosed rather than the usual open top that most models would have. Carefully inspecting it as he approaches, Dremog notices that the vehicle is moderately armored at the top, compared to the civilian model that is typically equipped with a light, invisible shield that acts like an umbrella to protect against rainfall or other debris, which provides an all-encompassing view of the outside world with no visible obstruction. This model before him, however, which he can only imagine is for military use, is blast-shielded, covered in thick metal walls that encompass the top of the vehicle. Now beginning to wonder whether or not his intuition was correct about the safety of this voyage, if he was truly being guarded or detained whilst going with these men to an unknown place. As soon as that thought ends, a loud roaring thunder booms throughout the dark night sky of the world. Looking upward as a trail of purple lightning weaves its way through the clouds, he's amazed at its beauty. Being such a rare sight on this world, purple lightning isn't the typical coloration you'd see. Most would be a deep blue or light blue. But when a purple one is seen, it's regarded as good omen, especially for Force users. Satisfied as a deep feeling of reassurance washes over him, he gets into the armored speeder as the doors open automatically by the motion of the Imperial officer, pressing a small device that he is holding in his hand. Trying to contain his anticipation and the wild, rampant thoughts of speculation that riddle his mind, the young acolyte looks outside one of the 6 windows that surround the vehicle and tries to drone out any lingering anxieties or doubts that could plague his mind. As the scenery of the jungle of Dremog Kro wisps by, he could feel something at the forefront of his being hit him like a wave, an energy that is very pronounced and slightly familiar. Similar in makeup to the dark side power that emanates off of the Sith Academy, this was more unique and precise. As they got closer to the direction of this energy, he could see out through the cockpit window a large black and dark gray estate spanning 666 feet wide and 999 feet high. He didn't know exactly how he knew the exact measurements, but it gave a sense of déjà vu, as if he had been here before. Closing the distance, he could make out more finer details. The grand archway that acted as the main entrance, several ornate statues and markings dotting the large building, and surrounding that large edifice that looks more like a fortress than a mansion, looks to be several other smaller structures in a circle around the main building, numbering 3 in total aside from the main construction that towers above the rest. The speeder descending downward towards the top of the towering edifice, they land at one of the several landing pads that are seated at the crown of the building. Stepping out of the vehicle alongside several of the armed military guards, the Imperial officer in the white uniform ushers Dremog along in a polite manner.
Right this way, Master Dremog.
Seeing a much calmer demeanor than he did at the Academy, the officer looks more pleased with himself than he did before. Maybe he was scared of failing his task. Or perhaps it was the presence of so many power-hungry Sith acolytes at the Academy that caused him some discomfort. In either case, the young pureblood didn't really care and simply followed the officer whilst simultaneously being accompanied by the armed soldiers and the unknown hooded individual. Descending down a flight of stairs instead of taking a turbo lift, they move through a series of doorways and large hallways inside the mansion. When walking through this grand building, the young pureblood can't help but to be extremely impressed with the decor, admiring this place in awe, almost stupefied by its finery. It is large, expansive, ornate, and having a dark, regal ambience that permeates the area. During the walk towards who knows where, he can see a few human officers, droids, and alien slaves move throughout the large halls and catching glimpses of rooms that have a variety of uses, such as communication, dining, and lounging. After a 10-minute walk that felt like half an hour, they finally arrive at a door that sits the end of a long hallway. To either side of this doorway are large humanoid statues that reach a height 8 feet, and expecting to see the typical depiction of the most powerful within the Order, as usually most Sith would honor the supreme ruler of the Empire, Emperor Vitiate, by decorating many expensive structures with statues resembling his likeness. But these statues didn't resemble him at all, but of someone else. And when he was starting to have a feeling that made his soul flutter when he thought it looked slightly like himself, a voice reverberates through the large metal door that sits between the two sculptures.
Enter!
The Imperial officer flinches when he was reaching halfway towards the computer terminal that rests on the wall beside the large metal door, meaning to open it, but is interrupted by the loud, authoritative voice that shakes the world around them. A few seconds of shock passes as everyone, including the military guards escorting him, could feel the power of authority radiate off the door that obstructed whatever was on the other side. With contained anticipation, Dremog watches as the officer presses a button on the side panel beside the door, and it opens to reveal the room that contains the potent voice that trembled the souls of these men. The chamber inside was massive, stretching about 171 feet ahead and 66 feet to either side. It is an expansive space that was decorated with ornate weapons. Some could be identified as relics of the old Sith Empire. Daggers, swords, whips, axes, glaives, shields, an entire assortment of different military antiques that seem relatively pristine. No doubt that such artifacts would attract the envy of rivals, peers, and the nobility that would step into this lavish chamber. At the end of this impressive room sat a throne on top of a small flight of stairs that elevated it 6 feet off the metal floor. It wasn't as lavish as the rest of the establishment, but a simple metal gray throne with a pointed tip for the backrest. What was peculiar, though, was it being completely vacant. Half expecting for at least someone or something to be seated on top of it, the young Sith did a quick visual scan with his eyes without moving his head to see if there was anyone else in this chamber other than the guards and officers ushering him forward. Nothing. Just the dead silence of the chilling space and the echoes of boots clacking against the metal floor. Stopping 4 feet away from the foot of the small flight of stairs, the military personnel stay behind Dremog as they remain posed in a bowing position, waiting for their lord to emerge.
I have waited a long time for this day,
a voice said from behind the young pureblood. Remaining composed, the young man slowly half turns to see a tall man clad in black armor and a black cape. Attached to his belt was the unmistakable sight of a lightsaber. Quickly examining the hilt closely with his eyes, at the point where the ignition of the blade would be, he sees 2 small, pointed blades jutting out at a 30-degree angle. No doubt it can be used as a dagger to slice an opponent mid-combat. At the bottom of the hilt where the pommel rests looks to be some kind of attachment, perhaps to adjoin another lightsaber to it, converting it into a double-bladed weapon for more rapid attacks. Surveying the rest of the 6-foot-tall man, he can see fire ginger hair styled in a crew cut fashion, similar to a buzz cut but slightly elongated at the center. A human with pale skin and a Brett-styled ginger beard that encompasses his chin and the side of his face. His appearance was all neat, his hair cleanly cut, and not one thing out of place in his attire. There was one particular thing that caught Dremog's eye, however. It was the strange sigil tattooed on the man's forehead. Circular in shape, the design is red in color and has 2 horns jutting out from the top of the circle with 2 smaller tips extending out from both sides. Inside the circle are intricate patterns that he couldn't identify or make sense of. The young acolyte stumped, as to never have seen it before in his life. He promises himself to quickly remedy that lack of knowledge when or if he gets the chance to learn about it at the soonest opportunity. Looking directly at the Lord, who is staring back at him with yellow and red eyes. The tall, ginger-haired man looks to be pleased with himself, gratified at the presence of the young acolyte. Debating with himself if he should bow or kneel, Dremog is at the beginning of his motion to do either one when he is abruptly disrupted by the man asking a question.
Do you know who I am?
Confused as to whether this was a trick question, the young man simply answered in earnest, as the tone of the question suggested a bit of eagerness that was held back by a stoic calm.
You are Lord Syoth, as my escort here has alluded me to before taking me out of the Academy.
The Lord continuing to stare at the young pureblood and having the expression of looking for something, a reaction perhaps, a deceit? The young Sith couldn't say. After a brief few seconds of silence, the man nods slowly in contemplation, and he continues on to ask.
Did you feel a sense of remembrance when you arrived here?
In surprise, Dremog is almost stunned to not speak, but manages to say,
I did feel a sense of having been here before, but I don't ever recall visiting this mansion ever before in my life.
Exactly like the sensation of revisiting a dream.
amazed as though this man was finishing the young man's sentence, in a way that would be akin to reading another's mind, peering into one's soul. With an expression of stupefaction, Dremog simply stared back at the Lord, not knowing what to say.
Leave us.
As the Lord said while turning his gaze briefly to the officer and soldiers, then giving a curt nod to the hooded individual as a signal to go with them. Syoth returning his gaze back to the young Sith, he asks in a passing amusement,
What were your impressions of the Academy?
Assuming he is referring to the Sith Academy he just left, Dremog goes on to give a comment of utter contempt for the place.
Tedious, monotonous. It was beneath me.
Nodding slightly in agreement, the Lord goes on to state,
Many things will be beneath you, my apprentice, and soon, numerous things surrounding your fate will be revealed to you. Although it has been quite some time since I last saw you, I assure you that everything is transpiring exactly as it should.
Uncertain as to what exactly that all could mean, he rewinds in his mind to a few of the last words uttered in that sentence. Since I last saw you?
I apologize, my lord, but have we met before?
The Lord. Raising his entire brow with a bit of amusement and almost recollection, he replies,
Once when you were a child, but all of that will be explained in due time. For now, come with me.
Walking past the young Sith as the Lord's cape whooshes past, Dremog follows closely behind as they exit the throne room back into the hall from where he had entered. Moving past several lengthy passages, they arrive at the entryway to a gymnasium. Walking inside, Lord Syoth asks,
How well are you accustomed to swordplay?
Adequate enough to embarrass some fools at the Academy.
Observing the large gymnasium that is in the shape of a large rectangle stretching 300 feet across, 150 feet wide, and the ceiling reaching to a height of 200 feet, it is an impressive sight to be sure. Standing at the edge of the balcony that oversees the entire arena, he can see the walls were lined with several mounted vibro blades, electro staffs, pistols, rifles, and shields of all different makes, models, and variations. The walls were of a metallic light gray, and the lighting consisted of a white illumination coming from recessed parts within the metal surface. At the end of the gym were several practice dummies positioned for target practice. There were, in fact, several soldiers who were performing simulated melee and ranged combat scenarios, but quickly scattered and vacated the area when Syoth and Dremog stepped down from a set of wide stairs that descended to the floor below. Stopping at the center of the arena, Lord Syoth has his back turned to the young pureblood and extends his left arm outward to his side and telekinetically draws his lightsaber to his hand, igniting it to reveal the crimson blade, and then turns his body to face the young red-skinned Sith.
I will test to see if you're adequately sufficient enough to be amongst the true Sith.
Sweeping in from the left, Syoth does a wide horizontal slash that misses the young man by merely a few inches, but doesn't leave room for the pureblood to recover or fall back as the Lord comes back for another attack. Coming from above with full force, the Lord does a straight downward slash towards him. With no recourse but to block, Dremog draws his vibroglaive attached to a magnetic clamp on his back and by pure instinct manages to catch the raw heat of the lightsaber blade against the metal tip of the glaive. The metallic blade attached to this staff that is vibrating at a high frequency manages to stop the lightsaber dead in its tracks. Melee weapons equipped with this technology have an incredible cutting power that surpasses even the most well-forged blades and can even parry against a lightsaber. Which can only last for a brief moment though, as the young Sith can see the metal start to turn red hot from only 3 seconds of coming into contact with the red pillar of light. With his knees buckling from the sheer strength of the downward attack, the young man can barely move without feeling like he'll succumb to the attack's brutal pushdown. Feeling trapped to go to either side, back up, or even stand up, he takes the only route available and moves forward with his entire body, so the lightsaber blade would only slice the air behind him, and the wrists of Seoth would be pressing against the top of the young Sith's cranium. Using all his strength to slide the glaive off the red blade made of pure light, Dremog shifts it on its side to try and cut the abdomen of the Lord before him, which looks to be a gap in the black imposing armor. The young apprentice is soon met with a kick from the Lord's right knee before the glaive could make contact with his stomach. Discombobulated from the sudden strike below the chin, Dremog almost falls to his rear but catches himself by steadying with one knee and one foot flat on the floor. With a pronounce ringing in his ears, he tries to refocus as Lord Seoth prepares to do another downward strike with full force. Unable to refocus his vision completely, he relies solely on his intuition to guide his weapon and is astonished to still be alive as he thrusts his vibroglaive upward to meet the crimson pillar, a quarter of the way towards its descent before it gains its full momentum and redirects it in a circular motion starting clockwise to the ground. In this moment of exhilaration, he presses a button near the top of the glaive's handle and the entire staff collapses to 1/4 its size, turning it into a broadsword that makes it easier to accomplish certain maneuvers. It does, however, put the majority of the weight on the blade itself. But, with the handle being shortened, he doesn't have to worry about moving it around so the staff doesn't become obstructed with his body. Jerking the blade away from the entrapped lightsaber pointed towards the ground, he does a circular motion with the weapon to gain momentum and swings towards the left side, or the right side in Seoth's view. Before the sharp metal could make contact, the man clad in black armor extends his free hand outward, palm held open, and pushes the young pureblood 20 feet away with a telekinetic push with the force. Nearly knocking the young man off his feet, he manages to only skid across the hard metal surface, but the grip he had on the vibroglaive loosens, and it flung out of his hand even further away than he is now. Thinking to make a quick dash for his weapon that is resting on the ground a few feet away, he catches a glimpse of Lord Seoth, leaping a great distance of 20 feet horizontally towards him in one bound. Red lightsaber in hand held high above his left shoulder in a charge meant to cleave the opposition in two. He is terrified at the idea of being met with such a vicious lunge. Instinctually, Dremog thought in the briefest of instances that it would be quite lucky if Lord Seoth missed his mark by a few inches, and almost if by magic, the Sith Lord did exactly just that. The young pureblood stood absolutely still in confidence, and watched how miraculously the red blade missed his face by a mere inch. As to whether or not the Lord missed on purpose, showing off his profound combat skill by missing on purpose, or if Dremog somehow merely divined or created an event to happen with a simple thought, he is abrupted mid-contemplation by the searing heat of a red blade hovering a few centimeters away on the left side of his neck. Lost in thought over what just happened, he was unaware that Seoth had seemingly changed styles mid-stroke and adjusted his broad, heavy attack into a light twirl to attack the other side of him in quick succession. Left speechless, the young red-skinned man stares at the red blade threatening to get closer and closer to his neck as the small hairs on his skin are burnt away.
You have much to learn, my apprentice. If you ever hope to challenge any of the other lords, And to go to greater heights, you must practice the ways of the lightsaber.
Still standing and refusing to kneel, Dremog wondered if he should, if that was what the Lord was waiting for, so he could remove the red lightsaber threatening to cut him. But as though again the world around him responding to his thoughts, Syoth removes his lightsaber blade in one motion away from the young man and deactivates the crimson blade.
The road ahead will be difficult, and there will be times when you wish to kill me, to strike me down with all your righteous hatred. But know this, only the best swordsmen are worthy to inherit this legacy, and until you can beat me, then you will never claim it.
A twitching, irritated response shows on the young pureblood's face, but managing to compose himself and thinking with a rational mind, he nods in agreement. Thinking back on his life, every hobby or interest he has delved into, he has excelled at in every aspect, surpassing every other supposed master or expert. And if he could learn even just a small portion from this Lord of the Sith, who is offering to personally teach him, then in no time at all, he can surpass him. At the end of that train of thought, he could see the Lord raise a single eyebrow in amusement, almost as if he was agreeing with his inner thoughts, as if he was reading them. Turning around with his cape flapping in the air, Lord Syoth begins to walk towards the exit and says,
That is enough for today. Tomorrow will be far more rigorous. At 0700, I expect you to be ready.
Uncertain of what further trials, tests, and training are ahead, the young man merely does a slight bow of the head along with saying,
Yes, my master.